Hi there, folks. This is WP-Tonic, episode 125. We're going to be talking about 11 key steps to make your WordPress site load faster. Yes, folks, we're going back to the subject of speed. It's been asked for, and I've wrote a massive article on it, and John thought it was worthwhile going back and talking about it. So introduce yourself, John.
Sure thing. My name is John Locke, and I run a small WordPress consultancy in Sacramento called Lockdown Design. It specializes in local SEO and WooCommerce integrations. And who are you, Jonathan?
Folks, I'm the founder of WP-Tonic. Obviously, we do this podcast, but we're also, if you're a designer, developer, consultant, or a person in business, and let's say you're a designer, developer, consultant, and you've got legacy clients, you've moved on, you developed your business, but you've got some legacy clients at older rates, and they do have a tendency to phone you just in the middle of that big, very well-paid job. Maybe give them to us, and we'll treat them like the queens and kings which they are. If you're a business owner and you don't want to go on a small job forum and you've been messed around, why not come to us? We offer a boutique service, and we'll also look after you like the king and queens which you are. So how does that sound, John?
That sounds great. And definitely, you know, if you're looking to switch from managed WP or you know, whoever. That's definitely something that you could take care of.
Well, we do it all, don't we, John? So we're on this subject. It's the important subject, John, and I wrote a massive article, didn't I, John, about it. So let's start. Let's go through the 11 steps that I went through quickly and get some feedback from you, because I updated an original article that I wrote a year ago, and I thought it was time to update it. So in this article, folks, and it's about 3,500 words, but it really goes into everything, and you find it on the WP-Tonic site, the blog section. And like I say, it's called the key steps to make your WordPress site load faster. So basically, I start with step one, speed testing tools. I kind of moved from there. I still like Google Page Speed Insights because I think but then I've kind of moved from some of the other tools to GT metrics. I use quite a lot. So what are some of the things that you use, John?
Definitely. So as far as like when it comes to measuring the actual page speed, Google Page Speed Insights is a great place to start. It'll give you an overview of things that could be slowing down your site. So that's definitely like one thing that I start with, but that's not where I end, because Google Page Speed Insights doesn't really tell you the full story. It just kind of tells you things that they're looking for off the bat. A lot of people think that Google measures time to first byte is an important SEO ranking factor. And, you know, as far as from an user experience standpoint, page speed is super important because numerous studies have shown that people expect your site to load in 3 seconds or less. And if it's taking longer than that, they're going to bounce out of there and go to your competitor. And in fact, the large sites like Facebook and Amazon, they spend millions of dollars each year just trying to shave little microseconds off here and there because they realize how important speed is. So when it comes to measuring the tools, Google Page Speed Insights is one. But the web page test, you know, GT metrics, those are really good ones because they give you a waterfall view of, you know, each asset that's loading on your page. And what that really shows is like to assemble a web page, it has to download, the browser has to download all the pieces of the site, all the pieces of the page, and then put them together. And so it'll show you, you know, in a graph, each piece that's downloading, so you can see that. Another good tool that I've used that's more recent is there's a page speed test tool from WP Engine that'll kind of give you a good sense of what's loading. It's kind of like a mishmash of these other tools, but it has some insight. And one thing that I do for my own edification is use the Chrome developer tools. Go to like a page, do inspect element, and then go to the network tab, and it will show you a waterfall, like all the pieces of the page downloading, similar to the web page test. But the one thing that you're going to want to click on once you load the page is the very first thing, the very first component of the page, which is the domain name of the page, and it will show you the time to first byte. And this will be something that we come back to in a minute, but look at the overall time that it takes to render the page and the time to first byte.
Yeah, the thing that I think that's great advice, and I actually forgot about the Google development tool side of it. That's a great tip, John. But the one thing that I need to clarify a bit more for myself is how DNS can affect it. Would you say having been reasonably fussy about where you're parking your domains? Because I normally have my domain part, and then I use a hosting provider. I don't allow the hosting provider to also register my domain with. But where you park your domains, you've got to be reasonably fussy where they are. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. So I also separate the domain registration and the hosting of the site out. I don't allow the host to also control the domain registration. A lot of people will use, say if they have something where it's like a managed WordPress host and they don't have name servers, but they have you point the domain name at either like a C name or an A name. A lot of people will use something like Cloudflare to do domain flattening, to where if your host changes the particular IP address that your server is on, it will just follow the domain name. So that's definitely something you can use. But yeah, definitely separate out your domain name and your hosting.
And be aware, because that can affect speed, having bad DNS setup. So that can that's something you've got to be aware of, folks. So I think, like I say, I just like the visualization of GT metrics, and there's resources in the post that also give you some additional information about the extensive information that they give about what all these things, this waterfall really means. Now on to 2, which is hosting. We've covered this to some extent, John, haven't we? But I think we just quickly go through it. Like we said in previous episodes, your kind of general $3.50 hosting package from a unnamed sources, John, probably won't hack it, will it, John?
No, definitely not. And so that's one of the complaints that people have is my site is slow, or it's taking forever to load. And then you kind of research and you dig down a little bit and you find that they're typically spending about $5, maybe $10 if you're lucky on hosting. And they will have something like one of the EIG companies like HostGator, one of those companies, or they will have the really cheap GoDaddy hosting, and shared hosting. The way that they're able to charge $5 a month to host you is they're taking a whole bunch of sites and jamming them into this server, as many as they can possibly fit into one server. And shared hosting, yes, you save a little bit of money each month, but it's hurting your business because, as we said before, your customers they're on their phone, they expect things to load fast, and when they don't load fast, they're not sitting there for 30 seconds waiting for your site to load. They're going on to your competitors' sites because your site is just taking forever to respond. People are used to things loading like a native app. They want things to load quickly. So cheap hosting won't cut it. What you need to do is go to a managed WordPress host or a VPS host that handles WordPress, that specializes in WordPress, and has the servers configured not just for general web hosting, but specifically for WordPress, and keeps up with things like keeping the software up to date, like a PHP version, and these things up to date, which like many general hosts, even ones that say they're enterprise hosting, don't do.
No, I think that's great, John. So like in the post, I just knock out a few names: SiteGround, InMotion Hosting, WP Engine. I think they're free. That in general, you're not going to go too wrong, and they offer. And then I talk about WP Hosting, and the founder of WP Hosting, Spot, has been on the show. But they offer
episode 114.
Yeah, and like what John said, the other thing is like I'm sure with WP Engine and InMotion is like what version of PHP do they offer? You've got to be a bit careful because some themes won't support it. But PHP7 makes a difference, doesn't it, John?
No, it makes a huge difference, and what everybody is saying too is it will shave like a good half a second off your load time, depending on what you have loading on your site.
And does the hosting company support HTTP2 or not?
That's a really important question because that's coming down the pike.
Now, the last thing, which I'm probably not going to pronounce it correctly, John, is it nginx? The alternative.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that one, it's nginx.
nginx.
Yeah.
Compared to, I'm having a bit of a brain fart on
Apache.
To Apache. It's supposed to be a lot quicker than Apache. Do you think it is, John?
I think it is, and what you'll notice is that's the biggest difference between your managed WordPress hosting companies and your generalized web hosting companies. A lot of the general web hosting companies will have an Apache server, which is fine, but then they'll install cPanel, which kind of drags down the speed a little bit. I mean, it's convenient for the site owner, but it affects the site speed. What you'll see with a lot of managed WordPress hosts is they'll have an nginx server, and then they'll have kind of their own customized dashboard. And each hosting company is a little bit different the way that they handle that. But the good managed WordPress hosting companies that are focused on speed and performance, they'll generally have an nginx like server and then some sort of custom interface in the dashboard, and they'll all be custom styled to that particular company. But
just to end this part about hosting is do go to the post, folks, and also we've partnered with WP Hosting Spot. They've become a preferred partner of WP-Tonic, and the great thing, folks, is that it starts at $35, but and they work with DigitalOcean, but you can run free websites on that $35 plan. Obviously, folks, you've got to have some common sense. You probably ain't going to run your 500 membership WordPress membership site or your very busy e-commerce website with 2 other sites. But if you're looking at general marketing sites with pretty high traffic, you can run those free sites on that package, and that's not bad value, John, is it?
No, that's definitely a better type of package as far as the value than some of the other hosts out there. And again, you would have to like compare and contrast, look at make your own decisions, but definitely look at what's out there. That is definitely something that is unique to WP Hosting Spot when it comes to what they allow you to have on your serving installation without sacrificing speed.
So we go forward. As they say. This is something I've really added, and I didn't pay attention, and it. I think it's one of the interesting subject. Point 4: external calls, and this is where a lot of general website owners and that are not aware of, and it's something that you really do need to be aware of, John, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to external calls, when you load a ton of stuff, the more stuff that you load, the more that it's going to drag your site down. So you need to kind of be aware of that. And a lot of people, they will have tons of plugins. They'll have tons of social media, JavaScript loading on their site, and that can affect the speed. So, and here's the thing too, like with WordPress, like a lot of these, like each plugin will load its own CSS and its own JavaScript. And those, like we said before, when you're looking at the waterfall of how the browser goes and gets all the files that make up the page, each one of these JavaScript and CSS files it has to go get, it has to go back to the server where your site is and then pull it into the browser. So it goes back and forth, back and forth. Each one of these is what's called like an HTTP request. It's an external call to another file. So what a lot of plugins that do caching or will combine files into one master file, that is a way to reduce the number of round trips that your browser has to make to go get the files to put together a page, and so that reduces speed. Or I should say, it improves speed.
Yeah, this is a big subject, folks, and I did skip point 3, reducing plugins, but they're kind of linked. 3 and 4 are kind of linked, folks. But to start off with, this is why it might be a good idea to get a developer consultant to look over what themes you're thinking of buying, or this is linked to why you need to be fussy about where you're buying your theme from, folks. Is some of the most popular themes on certain marketplaces are terrible when it comes to this, because even though if you're not choosing an option, it's still loading these calls. That's correct, isn't it, John?
That is correct. And and you do see this. This is something that the average person, when they're getting a site commissioned, say they're a developer, they're going to an agency, they're going somewhere to get their site built. A lot of these agencies, what people don't realize is what they do is they go shopping at ThemeForest, and then they basically throw in all the photos and fonts and content and all that. But those ThemeForest themes, and I'm talking about X, Avada, Salient, all those top ones that sell a ton of copies that are on the first page there. They're bundled with all kinds of stuff because, as you've called them before, they're Swiss Army knife themes. They're trying to do all things for all people instead of being focused on one task. And so they're bundled with WooCommerce, they're bundled with BuddyPress, they're bundled with all these different plugins that are built into the theme, and they're always being called whether you're using them or not. And these are not only is that a huge security risk, that's a whole nother topic of
Yeah,
bundling.
we could go on for ages.
Yeah,
but
you go on a whole separate tangent about that. Not only is it a huge security risk, but those things are loading all the files that it takes to make those things run, whether you're using them or not. And this is the trade-off. You're buying a $59 theme, expecting it to do the work of a, $5,000, $10,000, $50,000 site. And what ends up happening is the performance of your site is taking a huge hit because it's loading like 20 plugins whenever somebody loads up the page. And I don't know if this is in your article or not too, but those ThemeForest themes, a lot of them, especially the ones that use like Visual Composer, they're loaded with shortcodes. That also slows down your page. Divi, the same thing. Visual Composer, Divi. I know we've talked about page building plugins before, but I just want to throw that out there. Those things are built with shortcodes. So every little line, piece, component of the page, it's having to go look up the PHP file that controls that shortcode and then put it in the page and look it up and put it in the page. And those things end up, when your site goes to scale, when it starts getting big, those things don't hold up anymore, and your performance just drags and drags. So
I think that's great. We're going to go for our break, folks, and when we're coming back, we're going to kind of finish off with the external calls and plugins and move through this article I wrote. Be back in a minute, folks. We're coming back, folks. We're having I think, a very insightful discussion about speed, page loading, an extensive article I've written on the WP-Tonic website. It's a bit like War and Peace, really, but I really went into some detail, didn't I, John?
No, definitely. This article, the 11 key steps to make your WordPress site load faster. This is like a lot of the things that we've been saying before, but it bears reiterating because performance is something that people don't necessarily focus on, but it's one of those things that affects all the other parts of your site, like conversions and like how many people are, it affects your SEO, it affects your conversion rate, all that stuff. So
if you don't get this right, folks, you can do everything else and it just ain't going to pay dividends. And like what John said, folks, it's unfair. You are going to be compared to apps, Facebook, sites that have had a ton of money thrown at them. But unfortunately, your website is going to be compared when it comes to speed to these large enterprises, aren't they, John?
Well, unfortunately, that is the truth, and and it's not particularly like a fair comparison to somebody that's trying to do it themselves versus a site that's had millions of dollars pumped into it. But that's a world we live in. So that's again why you need to focus on the things that you can focus on, and site performance is definitely one of those areas.
Yeah. So just before we go on to the plugin, we've done it in a little bit of reverse because it's plugins is free and calls. We're drawing a picture here, folks. So you haven't really got very good hosting. You've bought one of these Swiss Army themes that's got multiple calls, but the funny thing is, actually WordPress has some very well documented and mechanisms to handle these calls the proper way, don't they, John?
Yeah, definitely. You can definitely read the codex, the WordPress codex, if you're a developer. The information is there, like the best practices for calling functions, the best ways to do things. But the bad part is we live in a commercial society where and I'm not knocking these people. I mean, they're making money, but as a consumer, you need to be aware of what you're getting.
Yeah. One area, so we're going to go on plugins. I've really changed my philosophy a bit. I agreed with some of the top people. It wasn't the volume, it was the quality, and I still agree with that to some extent. But I think there's a middle road. I think if you just keep hammering the plugins, more and more plugins onto the site, you are going to end up with treacle.
Yeah.
You got to find a middle road, and I've got my set of plugins that I've tested on myself and I've used on a lot of sites, and I know they're being support. And I thought, oh, it's just the quality and having your set, but I've kind of changed over the few months, dealing with many kind of maintenance scenarios, and just hammering the plugins. You will end up with treacle. What do you think, John?
Well, it's like you said, Jonathan, the quality really does matter. The plugins that you have on your site, it matters who developed them. It's not good to just go willy-nilly and go into the plugin repo on WordPress.org and just download like 50 plugins that you don't know who made them. You don't know the last time they were updated just because you're trying to get something to work. It's better to spend a little bit of money, get some premium plugins from trusted companies and developers who have been in the WordPress space and know what they're doing and have a good established reputation. It's better to do that overall. I mean, and this is the thing, don't skimp when it comes to your website, because I mean, this is the face of your business. This is how people are finding your business. This is how you're making money. It's definitely not something to, this is not the time where you start to get cheap. Spend some money on some good plugins if you need to, and research like what you're putting in your site. Put the right plugins, not just a ton.
Yeah, and like folks, it's better to deal this at the beginning. I've put some resources on a third-party plugin that does a really great job with switching off calls on pages where you don't need them, and it's very effective. But it's also starting in a good place, not really dealing with, not getting to the stage where it's just not loading on. You know, you can end up with a really bad and sad situation here, because a lot of people are going to be using mobile devices to go to your website, and this kind of treacle, I call it WordPress treacle. You don't want to end up in a scenario where you're dealing with what I call, me and my team, we call it WordPress treacle, where you end up, you're kind of trying to deal with one thing and then something, then you realize it's the hosting and you're just going round in circles. It's better to try and educate yourself and get a good setup rather than end up with a treacle situation.
Right.
Would you agree with that, John?
No, I do agree. You don't want your site loading like molasses in January. You want it running like a well-oiled Lamborghini. You want it to be a high-performance machine. You don't want it to be the sluggish jalopy that's, you know, broken down on the side of the road. You know, definitely. How does caching, you know, enable your site to move faster?
Well, you're storing a version in your browser, and you're storing a version. There's different levels of caching, and we're going to be talking about CDNs in a minute.
Right.
One of the things you've got to be a bit careful, and I'm guilty as this, is that you can end up with multiple versions all over the place, can't you, John?
Yeah, you can.
That can end up in a kind of perverted loop situation. There are some really, you know, I'm not knocking them. They're great. They've established plugins. You know, they've been around. There's a couple. You know, one is W3 Total Cache, and then you got another one called WP Super Cache. Got all links in the article, folks, about it. They're great, but they're not the most simplest things to set up.
No.
There's like 3,000, 4,000 word articles about setting them up, isn't there, John?
Definitely, yeah.
I think personally, you know, if this is a commercial site, I think you should really look at, this is just my opinion, a commercial caching plugin, something like WP Rocket. It seems very popular. I use one called Comic Cash Pro. They do a light version, but I would suggest that you're serious that you should cough up some money and buy the Comic Cash Pro. But they're good alternatives, and there's some others, aren't there, John? I'm just talking about the ones I put in the article.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, definitely. There are ones like that. Auto Optimize is one. Quick Cache is one. But I mean, the ones that are the most well known are W3 Total Cache and WP Super Cache. I mean, those are fine if you can't do anything better. But I would definitely also recommend something like WP Rocket or Comet Cache Pro. And again, caching is important because instead of the browser having to go all the way to the home server to get everything like round trip, it basically takes a snapshot of each page and it just says, here's all the files to make this page. Just go into this folder, grab everything. It just reduces the round trip speed that the browser has to make. It just, it's one of those things that just kind of helps shave a little bit more time off of everything.
And then we go on to that point 6, reduce the amount of web fonts. It's a bit like the plugin scenario. Web fonts make, used to, if you wanted anything, then the basic font selection that was inbuilt into your operating system, folks, it had to be a graphic. Now with this technology that's been around for a few years now, you can have really funky fonts on your site without them being graphics with all the weight. Unfortunately, inexperienced people and certain themes that we've also talked about, John, isn't it? You can go potty on this, can't you? You can go a bit demented and have fonts everywhere, but they all add to calls, don't they, John?
Yeah. So there's two ways that fonts can be abused, and what you're saying is true. In the early days of the web, there was what they called web-safe fonts, which were fonts that were known to be installed on all PCs and Mac type of computers. And I think it was maybe 12 different fonts. And then we got, font face capability, where we could download a font file, and then we could, with CSS, basically use different fonts. And those indeed would make, extra HTTP calls. Then we kind of went to the next level, where we got Google Fonts, which is a free service where they host different fonts, and you can use them just by using a little line of CSS or JavaScript. And a more sophisticated one, Adobe Typekit, where you get more premium fonts, ones that are more cultured, more, there's been a lot of work put into them when it comes to browser hinting and making sure that they render really good, more, kind of premium complex fonts that you used to only see in print and you'd have to pay big money for. But here's the downside of using, Google Fonts or Typekit is you're loading, depending on what type of font you're loading an entire font library. And what you see a lot of people do with Google Fonts, say they'll load all these different weights. Each font has they have different weights in there. Like you have your regular text, your bold text, your italic, and then some of these fonts, they have, font weights all the way up from hairline and light to book, regular, medium, semi-bold, bold, heavy, and black. And, if you're loading the entire library of a font family, every single possible weight and variation, then guess what? That's going to add a lot of time to how long it takes your page to download. The same thing with Adobe Typekit. Don't go hog wild on loading fonts, and look at how much page weight you're adding. Yes, it's cool that you can use a bold here and a regular here and maybe a semi-bold here, and that's awesome. But that's one thing to really consider in the design process too, is how much weight is this going to add to the total finished product? How long how much extra is it going to take for people to download this page because I want to include like all these different fonts. I think it's good to maybe have like 2 fonts for your site tops, 3 if you really know what you're doing. But what you see in a lot of these prepackaged Swiss Army knife themes is you can select, like a different type face for, a headline here or a body text here or, navigation here. And what ends up happening is you're loading like just jillions of fonts, and there's no need for it. So that's definitely another place where you have more design flexibility, but you also need to be aware of how it's affecting your site speed performance.
Yeah, like I say to John, you can end up with treacle, online treacle. 7 is about themes and frameworks, but I think in the previous points we've covered that a bit. Let's go on to 8, John, image optimization, because we don't want this episode to be War and Peace. But like I say, we're going to keep moving, but there's a lot to cover, and it's a big article. But go and read it, folks, and educate yourself. Image optimization. This went in the early days when I was involved in the web. You know, JPEGs, GIFs. Didn't even have PNG. You just had those 2, basically. You had to spend a lot of time with your optimization, and then we had broadband, but we've gone back to it, really, John, haven't we? Because you got mobile, and it's really easy to. The other factor, folks, is you've got to be really aware about images, because a lot of owners, they've got a really great camera on them all the time, either on their own phone, iPhone, or their Android, and they snap, and then they upload them, and WordPress will let you upload them, and then it's got the cropping tool, so it crops it, gives you some selections. The thing is, it's still loading up the original file, and that can be like 2 megabyte, can't it, John? So you've got to understand a bit about this, haven't you?
Yeah, and see, that's definitely something too. A good point you were making. In the early days of the web, when everybody was on dial-up, you had to really be aware of how much page weight you were adding.
When I was a young man, John, when I was a young man.
Yeah, definitely. Did you ride your dinosaur to school at that point?
Of course I did, John. Of course I did. Isn't it obvious?
Yeah, but definitely. And then we got like broadband, and but then mobile has been around. I mean, the rise of mobile has really been like the last 7-8 years, maybe. But I think everybody is still kind of like back in this mindset where we're designing for mobile, but really we're designing for desktop. And what I mean by that is, you look at a lot of web design nowadays, there's always like a big hero image. There's all these big retina, super heavy like images. And if you go back to like looking at the waterfall, like when you're looking at GT metrics, or you're looking at your, how much your page is downloading, a lot of that is images. The actual page weight, the average page weight of a web page has gone up year after year. I think maybe 4 years ago, the average was like 1 megabyte. I think the average now is it's like 1.8 megabytes. It's crazy, and that's the average. There's definitely ones that we've seen out there that are like 7-8 megabyte pages, because they're loading like just insanely huge images. When you take a photo with your phone, it's generally speaking, these are like high retina images, and most browsers don't need to load like a 4,000 by 3,000 photo. So when you're going to upload content, it's good to optimize it. Either crop it down, resize it down to the size you need, not in the WordPress tool, but like before you load it up, have somebody help you with that. Or you can use something like Photoshop to do like Save for Web, where you take out use image compression basically to take out a little bit of that information to where like people aren't going to notice it, but it's not the super huge original photo, you're taking out just a little bit of information like out of the photo, not enough to make it look like bad or distorted or anything like that, just a little bit, just to reduce that page weight and make sure that the actual dimensions of the photo are appropriate to what you need. Like I said, you don't need like a 5,000 by 3,500 photo on every single page. And you can use things like SVG where it's appropriate for icons. In the past, you could make like a sprite style sheet. You still see some sites doing that, but I see a lot more sites moving toward SVG now. So these are all things to be aware of, and you can use image compressions tools like your favorite tool, the Kraken. You can use that. Yeah,
I've moved off from the Kraken, even though I love the title. I've been doing it manually. I forgot the name, but it'll be in the notes, folks. There's a little desktop tool. It strips all the metadata from the photos and that, John.
Mm-hmm.
And I always run it now, and it saves between 10 to 30% in weight.
Yeah, that's significant. That adds up.
And I've been doing that now, so I got into the habit, and you just plonk it onto the app, and it sucks all that meta. What I mean, folks, is a lot of photos and that have identification info and all sorts of meta information. It's called meta information. You're not aware, and you can remove it. It's a bit like compressing your CSS and your JavaScript thing.
Right.
And it just strips it all out, and you do get some big savings. So be aware of that, folks, especially if you're doing which you should be updating your site every week, folks. Hard at it, as they say. On to, we're cracking on. So number 10, CDNs. Well, I still am, and I still think it's great value, Cloudflare. But this is another area where I've moved. I now pay for a commercial one, and I've been really happy with it, John. And that's Key CDNs. And Brian Jackson, who used to work for them, that still, totally supports the product. He just got a better paid job, the mercenary which he is. Sorry, Brian, you're a great guy. But he is actually, he's great fun, Brian. He put me onto it, and it's just a great system. What do you reckon, John?
Yeah, so definitely, like in Key CDN, Max CDN, whoever you're using, you want to use a CDN with your site. And the reason why, let me explain like what a CDN is first. CDN is an acronym that stands for Content Delivery Network. So like we explained previously, when your browser goes to get all the files that make up a page, the way that HTTP works right now is it can only download like one resource from one domain at a time. So if your site is mydomain.com and you've say got like 86 files that need to be downloaded, the browser has to grab like one at a time to build that page. So each time it's just going back, back and forth to get all that stuff. Now, a lot of this is going to change when HTTP2 becomes a standard. But until then, definitely I would recommend a CDN, because what it does is it's a network of servers that host your files, like say your CSS, your images, your JavaScript. And what it allows the browser to do is download from 2 different domains at a time. So instead of just doing this, it's doing this. It's downloading from 2 different domains at the same time, which allows your page to load faster. It gets the files that are necessary to build the page at a faster rate, because it's not going from one domain, it's going from 2 domains, your home domain and the CDN's domain. The other great thing about CDNs is they're a distributed network, meaning it's not just a server in New York or one over here in Chicago. They generally have servers in all different cities around the world or in different locations, to where, say, if you're a person in California and you're visiting a site that's hosted in New York, the CDN, there might be a location that's in LA. say. So it's going to download those image and CSS files from the CDN location that's closest to you geographically, because these things still need to download through the internet, and it has to travel that distance. And mind you, we've come a long way with internet technology, but just reducing the distance that those files have to travel to get to your browser also makes a difference. So there's two ways that CDNs help you. You can download files in parallel, which makes things faster, and the CDN, it's going to have locations that are closer to you. So all those files that go to make up the page, they don't have to traverse as far. So.
Yeah, I think it's great stuff, folks. And the truth is, it sounds a bit daunting, but if you sort out your hosting, get a reasonable theme, check it over, get a recommendation, or get somebody in the WordPress community. Go to a WordPress meetup, talk to some developers, get some recommendations. A lot of meetups, if you're just asking for advice, what themes do you recommend? I've got I'm looking at a problem and I'm looking at a Pacific plugin. What are you? They're delighted to give you advice on that level, aren't they, John?
Yeah, definitely.
You got a great meetup in Sacramento. We've got a rather small one in Reno, but normally in most major cities, you've got some multiple meetups all in the WordPress community, and they can advise you on this, folks. But sort out your theme. Don't become a plugin junkie. And if you sort these things out that's on this article, you from sloth, you will end up with a performance cheater, won't you, John?
Yeah, definitely. And you've got additional tips here that we haven't mentioned that are covered in more detail, like moving JavaScript to the footer.
Yeah, but they'll have to go to the article.
They'll have to go to the article and read all that. But definitely, there are more tools that you've listed here than we're mentioning here, just because of time. But definitely there are more resources listed here: plugins, services, tips, and techniques to making your site faster. And again, it benefits your customers, it benefits your business, it puts money in your pocket because people are not abandoning your site and going to look for another site that does load faster. All these things, conversion rates, all these things are affected by how fast your page loads. So definitely.
Certainly does. So folks, we're coming to the end of the show. Basically, join us on Fire Talk on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We normally have a great panel. We've had some technical problems this week, folks. That's why we're struggling a little bit. But we banged out an excellent show here with loads of information. But please join us at 10 a.m. on Fire Talk. The more people we have joining us, we have an active chat system in Fire Talk. We normally go on for about an hour, and then we have a discussion and answer any questions in chat afterwards. And that's it's a great show, isn't it, John?
No, it's a great show. We've got a really good rotating panel of other experts. We've got Sally Getch from the East Bay WordPress Meetup group. We've got Jackie D'Elia from Jackie D'Elia Designs over in Charlotte, North Carolina. We've got Brian Lee Jackson from WorkUp. We've Morten Rand Hendrickson from lynda.com and Pink and Yellow Media stops by occasionally. And sometimes we have Kim Shivler from White Glove Web Training. And we definitely have some surprise guests that show up from time to time too. And also, as you said, we've got a really active chat room. We've got a growing community there. Definitely something you should show up on. Is there anything else?
I'm going to embarrass my co-host now.
Oh,
I will be running this Saturday show because John is disappearing. He's leaving me, but he's got a slightly important appointment. Yeah. He's getting married. John.
I'm late for a very important date. Definitely Saturday. I have something going down that is definitely like a big day for sure. But Jonathan, you can take the reins. I mean, definitely. I think you'll be fine.
I'd like to wish you and your bride the greatest happiness, and it's thank you so much for being my co-host, John. It's you've been great. I hope Saturday goes really well. I've embarrassed him a little bit. He's trying
no, it's all good.
He's trying to keep it low key, but I thought I better mention it in the show, folks.
It's all good. It's definitely
so
good.
do Twitter him with your wishing him well, folks. He's a great guy. So we're going to wrap up this show, folks. Go to iTunes, subscribe so you get the show automatically. And if you're in the mind, give us a review. I keep saying it, but please give us a review. It really helps the show. And we'll see you next time on WP-Tonic. Bye.
Bye.